Hi there, and welcome to this Wheel and Anchor webinar on our Central Asia and the Silk Road program, covering the countries of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. In this webinar, I'll give you first a little overview of who we are at Wheel and Anchor, and then I'm going to jump into the day-by-day itinerary. If you've tuned into Wheel and Anchor webinars before and would like to skip the introduction, then just scroll down in this YouTube page to our chapters, and you can jump forward to where I start talking about the day-by-day itinerary. So, first of all, a little bit about us here at Wheel and Anchor. We are a community of travelers, predominantly from all regions of Canada. And what brings us together is a like minded approach to travel. And when I say like minded, I mean that we all have in common a desire to travel slowly, to travel inquisitively, to learn about the places that we visit along the way, and to connect with our fellow travelers. And it's this shared mentality, this common thread that brings us together as a community and ensures that on every trip we have a group of people that you will have a great time with, whose in company you will enjoy, and you'll probably want to come back over and over again, because our goal for you is that each and every one of our members becomes well traveled and well connected. And being well traveled for us is more than just ticking off items on a bucket list. And there's nothing wrong with having a bucket list. We all have them, whether we call it that or something else. But at the same time, the way that you travel is really defines how you relate to that particular country, the region, the people who are there, and humanity itself at a greater level. And uh, as I said before, connection is really important. And the way that you travel and how the itinerary is set up and the kind of people you travel with will really determine how connected you can become, not only to your fellow travelers, your fellow members at Wheel and Anchor, but also to the people that you meet along the way and to the cultures, traditions, habits, behaviors that they represent. That's what we're all about here at Wheel and Anchor. Accomplishing all this is, of course, no easy task, and it requires a dedicated team of professionals. And I'm proud to give you a short introduction of those people here. I'm actually only going to talk about two people. First of all, myself. My name is Gordon Dreger. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. I'm the curator of all the programs here. I've been traveling for most of my life, and I've been organizing trips for Canadians for well over 30 years. I'm joined, as I say, by a very by a wonderful team of people who are not only in Canada but who themselves reside in different parts of the world. But the most important person for you to know is our senior trip specialist, Paula Zarnik. Paula, very well traveled herself. She is the person who will receive your inquiry, whether it's by phone, by email, and she'll try to make sure that you get all of your questions answered, your concerns addressed, and make sure that this trip or any of our trips is a fit for you. Our plan for this webinar is quite simple. You're someone who's interested in finding out more about this very mysterious region on the other side of the world known as Central Asia. You want to find out what our itinerary entails and whether or not it's actually a fit for you. And I'm here to try to shed some light on what this program entails, all the highlights, all the elements that we have put in to give you a glimpse into life in this ancient region known as the Silk Road. And so I'm going to be, first of all, giving you a little bit of a geographical overview of where we're headed. And then I'm going to go into the daily itinerary and talk about some of the things that we've put in that I think will give you a tremendous experience if you decide to join us. First of all, if you want to locate Central Asia, what we're talking about on the map, you can see the inset that we have here. And so you'll find this region inside the box, which is north of the countries of India, Afghanistan, Iran, are all to the south. We have, of course, China off to the east and Russia to the north. It's a gigantic region, but again, one that's often forgotten. And we're going to be covering three countries here, beginning with Kazakhstan and Almaty, which is its largest city, its commercial hub. We'll fly in here and begin our tour with some highlights of the city itself and its environs. We will then travel overland, heading first of all to the east, to the area known as the Kolsai Lakes and Shirin Canyon. We'll then proceed to the border with Kyrgyzstan, crossing over on the east side of the high altitude lake known as Isikul. We'll stop in at Karakol, and we will make our way along the southern shore in between the area which is where Isikul and is separated by the Tian Shan Mountains. We will then head up to the west side of the lake, proceeding then again through some beautiful mountain valleys to the capital of Kyrgyzstan, known as Bishkek. After visiting Bishkek, we will then hop on a plane and fly over to the capital of Uzbekistan, known as Tashkent, a very green city that I'll share with you in a few moments' time. We'll spend a couple of days visiting Tashkent, learning what this remote capital city has to offer. We'll then travel by train to Samarkand, which is one of the most famous, one of the most well-known towns, important stops along the ancient Silk Road. We will then continue by train to Bukhara, yet another stop on the Silk Road, and make one final long rail journey up to Khiva, which is in the northwestern part of Uzbekistan on the border with Turkmenistan. And from there, we will fly home or perhaps elsewhere in the region. On this trip, we're going to cover some great distances by land, predominantly by road. We're going to stay in some beautiful five-star hotels, but also some very local accommodations known as guest houses. We're going to explore the architecture, the Islamic architecture that dominates throughout this region. We're going to see some traditions, and we're going to sample some of the very unique and delicious food that can be found throughout. So let's dive right in to the day-by-day itinerary. Our starting point for this trip will be the city of Almaty in the southeastern part of Kazakhstan. This city is well connected by airlines from both the Middle East and Europe. So from Canada, you're going to be flying across the Atlantic to one of the familiar gateway cities like Frankfurt or Paris or Munich or Vienna, or potentially through Turkey, through Istanbul, or perhaps even Dubai or Doha. So there are a lot of ways to get there, but no matter what, it's a fairly long journey. And once you arrive in Almaty, we're going to pick you up and begin our adventure. When you arrive in the airport and are picked up and brought into the city center, depending, of course, the time of day you arrive, a couple of things will strike you right off the bat. First of all, Almaty sits on the north side of the very high Tian Shan Mountains, which may very well still be snow-capped at this time of the year. When you drive into the city center, you'll be taken aback by the wide boulevards and the very green streets. The city was planted up approximately 100 years ago with trees that have now become high and towering. In fact, you'll be surprised how green that it actually is. And behind that facade of trees, you'll find both very modern buildings that have been built over the last couple of decades, but also old and crumbling sort of Soviet architecture. And it's this dichotomy between old and new that I think sets Almaty apart from many of its counterparts in Western Europe and Asia. Your first day will be spent mostly resting and recuperating from the long flight, and you may have a chance to wander around in central Almaty. It's a very safe city, and a lot of the main points of interest are accessible by foot from our hotel, which is right in the center of downtown. We'll spend the first part of the day exploring some of the major landmarks of the city, partly on foot and partly by coach. But then we'll continue outside town to visit the Gunny ethnic village. And this would be sort of the equivalent of an Upper Canada village or a pioneer village, and combined with, let's say, a rodeo. And it was all created not that long ago, about 15 years ago, by the Kazakh government, who were really interested in ensuring that some of the traditions and cultures from Kazakhstan in the past were retained, particularly considering all of the years that were spent under Soviet occupation and where a lot of local culture was sort of quashed in the meantime. So don't be surprised. I mean, you're going to find men or women perhaps on horses like you see in the picture. You'll find yurts, and you'll find a whole array of artifacts and dwellings that will give you a little bit of an insight into what past culture and life was like at Kazakhstan. And later on that evening, our welcome dinner, we're going to head up what's known as Koktoba Hill. We'll head up there by cable car. This is a hill just outside the central core of Almaty with an incredible view overlooking the city. With any luck, we'll get there by sunset so we can watch the setting sun over the Tian Shan Mountains and over the city itself. And we'll enjoy a dinner featuring some of the delights of Kazakh cuisine. Our next full day in Almaty is going to take in a couple of the sites on the periphery of the city, starting off with Shimbulak and Medu, which is the sports complex up in the mountains just to the south of the city, followed by a visit to a falcon farm. Let me first talk about Medu, which is where we'll visit in the morning. It's about a 40-minute drive south out of Almaty, and we're going to head up winding hills past the posh neighborhoods of Almaty up to an area where that is called Medu, which is where you'll find the world's largest high altitude skating rink. In fact, it's a giant stadium with a skating rink in the middle of it. And this is all part of the sports complex that you'll will then continue to see by taking a cable car, a European, an Austrian-made cable car, up to Shumbulak, which is the ski center high up in the mountains. So in a matter of a little bit over an hour, you can be from downtown Almaty up to a ski resort that will look familiar if you know places like Whistler or Aspen, with all of the shops and the cafes and the rental equipment. We won't have time for skiing of itself, but we will get a good glimpse of what is on offer for those who reside in Almaty, with, of course, great views of the mountains and looking down to Almaty itself. Heading down later in the afternoon, we're going to head to a falconry farm. And this is one of the traditions that is being preserved in not only in Kazakhstan, but also in Kyrgyzstan, that we'll visit later on. And we'll get a sense about how the tradition of keeping and training falcons has been kept intact all of these years. It'll be a very, very memorable experience seeing these majestic birds in action. On the fourth day of our itinerary, we're going to be heading out of Almaty to the east. And by this point, you won't have gotten much of a sense of the vastness of Kazakhstan as a country. Of course, it's the ninth largest country in the world, and basically about the size of India. But as soon as we travel outside of the city, heading east, you'll immediately get a sense of the magnitude here as we enter these majestic valleys and then off into some huge plains, the steppe, which comprises a lot of Kazakhstan's landmass. And it's here that we will find one of the most scenically beautiful parts of the whole country, the Kolsai Lakes district. There'll be a couple of key highlights for us in this region, and the first will be the Sharin Canyon. And while in sheer size, this does not, it pales in comparison to the Grand Canyon. Nevertheless, the thousands of years of wind and rain causing erosion has carved out this incredibly beautiful cavern that is, it's kind of like a sculpture garden. And we'll get to walk down through the valley itself to the river that carved it all out. And marvel at one of Kazakhstan's true pride and joy. Later on that afternoon, before we arrive at our hotel, which is actually very close to Kolsai Lake, we'll approach this lake here, which is beautifully set amongst the forested mountains. Now, for those of us from Canada, we have literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of lakes ourselves. But if we consider that most of Kazakhstan is steppe and flat land, it'll give us a bit of a different appreciation of this pristine environment, one of the few areas that has been set aside as a national preserve, and is certainly worthy of the trip that we're going to make. And we'll overnight here near the village of Sati, which UNESCO recognized as one of the world's best tourist villages. We'll conclude the Kazakh portion of our journey driving again eastwards and then south into Kyrgyzstan, passing again through some of this absolutely mesmerizing and vast scenery before we cross the border into Kyrgyzstan, where we'll be confronted with a completely different country altogether. And what's interesting is, of course, is that we often refer to this region somewhat inappropriately as the stand countries. And so one might assume that they are all similar, but in fact, they're remarkably different. And Kyrgyzstan was actually entirely nomadic until the Russians arrived in the 19th century. And the result of all this is quite fascinating because Kyrgyzstan has no ancient cities like we would be familiar with from Europe or Southeast Asia. It's all quite new because, again, the country was largely consisting of nomads who lived in yurts that we will see here and learn a lot more about as we proceed through the country. Now, you'll find that Karakol is not exactly a pristine architectural gem, anything but. In fact, it started its existence as a Russian military outpost as late as 1869. And we'll have a bit of a tour around the city, the livestock market, before we go a little further afield to learn more about what this region has to offer. Around a half an hour outside of town, we'll drive up to what's known as the Dieti Oguz Gorge. And this beautiful fir-lined valley has seven distinct sandstone formations, which are known as the Seven Bulls. And it's a dramatic landscape and one of our first of many great photo ops for the first part of the trip. We'll then head on and visit a women's cooperative where we'll learn a little bit about the local tradition of what's called needle felting. You probably have seen in documentaries those beautiful felt hats that this region is so well known for. And this is a tradition that has been passed down for generations upon generations. And it was nearly lost during the Soviet era. But thanks to the efforts of these local women, it has been preserved. And we'll get a chance to see them at work creating these masterpieces. And we'll even have the opportunity, this is a great little souvenir to pick up, one of the hats. You probably won't want the massive gowns that the women wore, but nevertheless, a fascinating spot that is always much appreciated, particularly by our women members. We'll then head on to a little village called Yurdik, where we will be invited into a Dungan family home for a demonstration of the local cooking techniques, which of course we will get to sample and give us a little bit of insight into this cuisine that developed as a hybrid between the food of Central Asia and northwest China. This is also the area where the Hui people, the Muslim people, escaped across the border into Kyrgyzstan in the late 1900s, which gave them the name the Dungans. We'll then depart from Karakol and make a fairly long journey along the south side of Lake Isikul. And if we're lucky and the weather is appropriate, we'll have a chance to make a stop so you can take a dip in this massive high alpine lake. Along this lengthy journey, we'll make a couple of stops, and one of them will be at the Kuzul 2 village, where this is one of the homes of traditional yurt making. And so we'll have the fun experience of being able to join a local Kyrgyz family who will show us the art of putting up these yurts, much as they did for centuries and centuries as the nomadic people that they were. After having lunch, we'll stop in yet another village where we'll be able to see the production of the traditional felt rugs known as shidrak. These designs have been produced by the local people all the way back since the days of the Silk Road. From here, we make our way on the west side of Isikul up into the spectacular Shon Kamin Valley, where we'll be heading for our guest house called Ashu. We'll spend 2 nights here, and having visited this very traditional yet very comfortable guest house, we'll get a sense of the dramatic landscapes, and we'll also be able to avail ourselves in the beautiful indoor pool that they actually have available at this particular spot. When I made my brief visit to the region, I only had a few hours to spend in the Shonkamin Valley, but I realized it was worthy of a much longer visit. We'll get to take in two different experiences on our full day in Shonkamin. First of all, visiting an old Soviet farm village known as a kolkhoz, where we can see the practices, the agricultural practices that were in place during that era, obviously related to collective farming that was the case all across the Soviet empire. Later on in the afternoon, we will visit a local school. And for me, this is always one of the highlights, is to be able to see where the children go to school, how they learn, and to interact and engage with them. And we'll, at the same time, also learn about this rural lifestyle where everything is, where the people basically live off the land. And we'll see how food is harvested, and the animals that are in the process, and all the way through to how it finds its way on our dinner table, which we will, of course, enjoy back at our guest house, sampling some more of the very local and, I found, largely very delectable cuisine. From Shonkamin, we head west, out of the country and the mountains into the city, specifically into the capital of Kyrgyzstan, Bishkek. Now, Bishkek, as with all of the other towns and smaller cities in Kyrgyzstan, is not old. As I mentioned before, nothing in Kyrgyzstan is all that old, given that the country only was developed after the arrival of the Soviets in the latter part of the 19th century. But while it doesn't have any massive skyscrapers, it has some very interesting buildings, one of them in particular being the Central State History Museum, which we'll visit and get a terrific sense through artifacts and displays about the evolution of history from the nomadic era through the Soviet era into the modern era. They also have a marvelous collection of those shidrak rugs that we saw being produced a couple of days previous. We'll wander around the city, the center. Most of the main sites are easily walkable on foot, having lunch, and then continuing on in the afternoon to the Idai Design Workshop. This was an award-winning fashion designer who took some of the Kyrgyz traditional textile techniques and added some sort of modern aesthetics. And so here we'll have a chance to learn the technique, the traditional art of hand rolling silk scarves that the founder of this design center still brought into modern culture. So it'll be a fascinating hands-on experience. We're staying at a wonderful hotel here in Bishkek that I chose myself, and our dinner will be Georgian this evening, a cuisine that we find actually all across Central Asia and is celebrated, much like we like our Italian food. In this part of the world, the go-to food for a lot of people often comes from Georgia. So we'll get a sense of that in our meal this evening. Before we end our visit of Kyrgyzstan, we're going to make a trip up to the Ala Gorge before then heading out along the ancient Silk Road, but stopping at the airport. Kyrgyzstan as a whole is covered by a vast area of towering mountain peaks, much like its neighbor to the south, Tajikistan, which makes visiting a lot of the country really open to high altitude adventurers and mountain climbers and so on. But by visiting Ala Acha Gorge, we at least get a glimpse of some of this spectacular alpine scenery. And as we make our way back down out of the valley on our way along the Silk Road. We'll make one more stop before reaching the airport to fly out. And we're going to stop in at a place called the Supara Village, where we'll enjoy local folk in traditional outfits. Again, it'd be somewhat reminiscent to our experience at the Gunny Ethnic Farm outside of Almaty. There'll be traditional music, some of the instruments that they've used, and it'll be a terrific way for us to celebrate our final day in Kyrgyzstan. And then we'll head to the airport and take our flight, which will bring us from one capital, Bishkek, to the next, to Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan. What's interesting about Tashkent is that most people don't know much about it, but it is actually the most populous city in Central Asia with about 2.6 million inhabitants, making it even larger than Almaty, a city that for us in the West may not have much recognition, but you'll probably have heard of it, whereas most people haven't heard much about Tashkent. Much like Almaty, one of the things that will strike you, as it struck me about Tashkent, is how incredibly green the city is. You'll drive in on these large highways that are literally surrounded by massive trees that were planted during the Soviet era. And when I asked a guide what the reason was for all these trees, it was actually a military rationale. They were planted so that they would grow up and be a defense against aerial surveillance. So you couldn't see what was happening down on the grounds, and the tanks could travel around back and forth. So it gives the city a rather impressive look. Of course, behind the scenes, you see a whole array of buildings from ancient buildings predating the Soviet era, but a lot of those sort of classic Soviet style architectural blocks. But amongst all that, and what has emerged over the last 25 years or so, is particularly in the center of Tashkent, a magnificent and modern commercial complex. It really surprised me and blew me away. I wasn't expecting much. We'll have a whole day here to sort of rest up and wander around. We're staying right again in the center of the city. It's a remarkably safe city. You can go pretty much anywhere on foot. The distances are quite large. They have a metro system, a subway system that is a little bit rickety compared to some of the other modes of transportation. But all in all, I found it a fascinating city to visit, and there are a number of things that one might take up during a day on one's own. There's the Chorsu Bazaar, which is a massive market with a huge domed structure in the middle, and tons of little places to buy interesting souvenirs. Although I will say that the shopping for some of those traditional items is perhaps better in Samarkand or Bukhara in the following days. You might also want to visit the Kasti Imam complex, and as a center of Islam, you find here the Quran of the Caliph Ottoman, which is said to be one of the 6 copies of the Quran produced by the Prophet Muhammad. So it's a very interesting place on a religious level, on a commercial level, and also just amongst the modern day Uzbeks, as it were. After a restful day at leisure, we continue our journey in the capital of Uzbekistan. Today, we'll spend the first half of the day exploring the city together with our local guide, who will tell us a lot of interesting stories about how this city has transformed, particularly in the 30 years since independence. And we'll start, in fact, with the Independence Square, one of the largest squares in the city, a mere 15 minutes walk from our hotel. And this square is where in 1991 they declared independence from the Soviet Union after the Soviet Union, of course, fell apart and pulled down a giant statue of Lenin, not the only such square around former Soviet republics, and replaced it with this massive monument of a woman dedicated to the motherland. There's a number of other spots that we'll see, but one of the highlights will be heading to what's known as the Plov Center. Plov is the national dish of Uzbekistan, and you will probably get to sample it more than once. I find it absolutely delicious. I would call it the Uzbek equivalent of paella. It's a rice-based dish that is cooked in a large pan, absolutely delicious. And so you'll get to sample that, as I say, probably more than once during our stay here. You'll have time in the afternoon to explore perhaps into the modern city center, which will be quite a surprise. And in the evening, we have a special dinner planned, which I'm not actually going to disclose what it is that we're going to do. But I know that this was something I hadn't expected when I visited. And I was really taken aback by the spectacle that exists in the center of the city. We'll have an early morning this morning as we say goodbye to Tashkent and head to the railway station. We'll pull out of Tashkent, leaving behind this incredibly green oasis, which will become apparent to you as our high speed train heads out of the station and into the desert. And we will gradually notice a shift in climate as well. In fact, we will from the moment that we arrive in Tashkent from Bishkek. And the train itself is quite a technological marvel. It is, I would say, almost the same quality as trains that you would find in Western Europe, which makes it a notch above the ones we find back at home. And a mere 2 hours later, we'll have made our journey across quite a drastic desert landscape and pull into the city of Samarkand, one of the most important along the ancient Silk Road. As we will have pulled in by late morning, we'll drop our luggage and immediately head out on foot to explore all of the sights of this remarkable city. There are numerous iconic sites in Samarkand, but probably the most well known, you may have seen pictures of Registan Square, which I show from one angle here in this photograph. There are many incredible examples of Islamic architecture all around the central part of Samarkand. And the good thing is we've managed to find a charming boutique hotel that is a mere steps from Registan and some of the other important sites, the Gur Emir Mausoleum. And a lot of these mausoleums in madrasas, they have something in common as to the architecture. And what's interesting is that from a distance, you see as if it's like a giant mosaic covering the building on all sides. But on closer inspection, you'll find that a lot of the patterns are actually Arabic script written into the walls, like the whole thing is some giant text or poem. By afternoon, we will leave you to your own devices to explore, among other things, the Siab Bazaar. Again, also only a short walk from our hotel. And this is the spot where you will really see the handmade arts and crafts that come truly locally from truly local sources. Unlike many spots in the world where you visit these markets and half the stuff is made in China. The products on display here, particularly some of this meticulous pottery that come from high up in the mountains in the eastern part of Uzbekistan, are truly incredible. We'll have a spectacular dinner here on a rooftop overlooking Registan Square. And later in the evening, they have this amazing light and laser show that just adds a whole other level to the experience of these incredible buildings in Samarkand. In total, we'll have 3 nights here in Samarkand. which gives 2 entire days devoted to exploring this city. And when I visited myself, I was a little bit unsure as to how long we should spend here because many itineraries that I had looked at before only allow for 2 nights, which is really only one full day. There's so much to see, not only in the city center, which arguably could be covered in one day, that it's worth the full extra day. So we're going to go a little bit outside of downtown on this day. And one of the spots that we'll see will be this Conagill village, which is on the road heading out to the border to Tajikistan. This is a meticulously designed and restored village with a number of canals running through where they actually have working water wheels powering a mill to produce this mulberry paper. They call it silk paper, but it's actually not silk. It comes from the same trees that the silkworm derives, where the silkworm lives and derives the silk thread. But here they actually use the mulberry tree itself to make this unique paper. Another stop, of course, talking about silk, is at the silk rug factory. I'm always a little bit have a bit of trepidation about these things. Having visited Turkey and other parts of the Middle East. You see, India, of course, you see rugs everywhere, but the ones produced in Uzbekistan, particularly in Samarkand and in Bukhara, are really of the finest quality that you'll find, I think, anywhere. And I must say, I learned quite a bit, having been, one of those call it unsuspecting buyers. But what I got to understand on my visit here, which I think will be truly interesting, whether or not you're actually interested in buying a rug is secondary, but what makes the difference between a truly quality silk rug and how it's produced, the time that it takes, truly remarkable. We'll head back to the same railway station once again to board the high speed train for Bukhara, which is, again, only a couple hours away, and we will arrive before lunch. Although Bukhara is a much smaller city than Samarkand, it's also younger, dating back to about 2,500 years ago. A key difference is that Samarkand was destroyed back in around the 12th, 13th century by Genghis Khan, and so was rebuilt at that time, whereas Bukhara retains a lot of its original buildings. Being so small and compact, it makes everything quite walkable. We can visit one madrasa to another, all these small little souks and displays of crafts all around the center of town. We'll visit Liabi House, which is this ensemble of pools, and how these bodies of water were transformed during and subsequent to the Soviet era. A lot of fascinating things to learn about the city. Our spot where we'll enjoy dinner, called Old Bukhara, is on the rooftop overlooking the tops of the madrasas. Really a spectacular place from which to enjoy a sunset and the lights of the city in the evening. After a restful night here, we'll have a half a day devoted to taking in some more of the key sites of Bukhara. One of the highlights and the thing that stood out for me most in Bukhara was visiting the so-called Ark of Bukhara, which is a 5th century fortress that when you approach it from the city center, you will see these massive walls upon which basically like a castle or a town was built. And this is one of those structures when you just walk up to it, you go, now that's a fortress. An incredible construction, and it was actually used as a fortress until a mere 100 years ago, at the time of the Soviet occupation. We give you the rest of the day to explore the town. This is one of those places where you feel like you could spend several days because there's so many little nooks and crannies, little craft ateliers, and so many cool spots to grab a coffee or maybe a cold drink, depending on what the weather is. And as I say, we'll already realize the significant difference in temperature here in Bukhara as compared to Kazakhstan. We'll have to have an early night this evening because we will wake you up in the wee hours of the morning as we head to the railway station for our trip by train up to Khiva. Now, this stretch of the railway, unlike the stretch between Tashkent and Samarkand and Bukhara, is, at least as of the time of publishing of this webinar, is still the sort of old style of regional trains. They are working hard to have a high speed train going up as far as Khiva, but there's no guarantees that that'll be done by the time we visit. If all goes according to plan, we will arrive in Kiva by late morning and already have a chance to, after we drop our luggage at our hotel, to set out and explore this ancient city. We'll do so at a bit of a relaxed pace for the first day, given that we will have already had a long journey behind us, starting in the early morning, and we will explore this former capital of Khwarezma, also known as the Korzem People's Soviet Republic. The walled inner city of Khiva, Ichankala, was the first UNESCO site in all of Uzbekistan. So we'll have a leisurely day exploring some of these incredible sites, and then have a delicious evening enjoying the fruits of the cuisine, which here, which is truly in the middle of the desert, and you'll realize that as the train passes through hundreds of kilometers of vast open plain, that everything here is a little bit different than other parts of Uzbekistan. Today, on our last full day in Uzbekistan and on our journey through Central Asia, we'll spend the first part of the morning exploring this UNESCO World Heritage Site called Ichan Kala. While we will have touched on it on the previous day, on our arrival day, there are so many bits to this incredible World Heritage Site: the Kunya Ark Cathedral, the Tashklovi Palace, and the minaret of Islam Koya are some of the incredible Islamic masterpieces. There's also an important spiritual significance to this area because apparently, or according to tradition or according to legend, the bricks of the citadel were brought together by the Prophet Muhammad, who of course is the central figure in Islamic religion. His son Shem is also said to have dug the Jevak Canal, which runs through and under the city. So the entire space is considered sacred. It's considered spiritual, and for those that have visited, they say that Kiva was really one of their most favorite stops along the whole journey through Central Asia. We'll have a farewell lunch on this day, partly owing to early morning departures on the following day, but still have enough time to look around, grab those last minute souvenirs, and breathe in the desert air of Central Asia. As always, we'll have independent departures from our hotel in Khiva. The airport that serves this part of Uzbekistan is actually about an hour outside the city. It's quite a modern new airport that's been built there, and it's known as Urgench. And from here, there are, again, a number of connections through various gateways, through Istanbul being one of the most common ones on Turkish Airline, to take you back home or to your next destination. I hope that this webinar has given you a little bit of an insight into some of the amazing sights and sounds and tastes that we'll have on this journey through Central Asia. There's a lot more details to be had. Of course, you can find all those by heading to our website. If you haven't been to the webpage, you will find the link to the page for this trip in the description, in the YouTube description below. You can also download our detailed trip itinerary and the reference guide that gives you a lot of the frequently asked questions, the things to know about this trip. Of course, there's always the chance that there'll be a question or two that you have that is not covered in all of our material. We do our best to provide as much information as possible. And so if you're interested in finding out more, then beyond all of those, all of the material there is to review, then please do drop an email to Paula Sarnik in our office, and she will be more than happy to answer any questions. Or if she can't find the answer to the question, she'll certainly come to one of either myself or one of my team, and we'll make sure you have everything you need to know about this trip. In closing, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to tune in and find out a little bit more about Central Asia. This truly is one of the last sort of undiscovered, unknown parts of the world, well off the beaten track, as it were, of travelers who may have who may have covered many other parts of the world. So I encourage you to give it some serious thought. Join us on this trip. We've spent a lot of time putting this program together. I'm very excited, encouraged by our partners, our local guides, who will ensure that you have an extremely memorable visit to Central Asia. Thanks for tuning in.